Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today is the 7th of October 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So another bridge hack today. This time it has hit the Binance bridge and about $2 million, I believe, worth of BNB was stolen, which was worth $566 million at time of the theft here. Now this is one of the largest bridge hacks that we've seen in the ecosystem. Obviously not the first, won't be the last. I mean, it's kind of funny at this point because we've seen so many of these kind of like bridge hacks before, right? It's not even surprising anymore. Like I woke up to this and I'm just like, okay, well, just another bridge hack, right? And Samsung here, as usual, has the best thread on the topic. So if you want to get the full details of what actually happened in the hack, you can go check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But I do want to clarify some things here. So the first thing I want to kind of clarify is that you can look at this, right? And you can see, okay, well, this means the multi-chain thesis is dead, blah, blah, this means it's insecure, all these sorts of stuff, L2s are more secure than these kind of cross-chain bridges, blah, 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 right? And I've spoken about this before, but essentially there are a lot of similarities, but also differences between these. The similarities are at the smart contract level, right? Like every smart contract, just like every piece of code or any code that is written, can have bugs that exist within it. The more complex the code, the more risk for bugs is the general rule of thumb there. But then there are economic concerns. So if your bridge is secured by validators, there is a concern of 51% attack on the bridge, and that's usually related to its economics. So if it's cheap to attack, then there could be an attack. There's attack on the cryptography itself. If that's not implemented correctly, that's related to a smart contract bug, but a bit different there. So there are multiple kind of ways to attack things here. And obviously, there are bridges that are just multi-sigs, and if that got compromised, then the bridge gets compromised. So yeah, there are multiple different ways to compromise a bridge here. I think the main advantage layer 2s have, at least rollups have, over the cross-chain bridges, at least from my perspective, is that they're easier to reason about, which means that the contracts are much simpler and much more secure because they're just hosted on Ethereum, and the L2s through their proving systems inherit Ethereum security. That because of that, that's what makes them secure. It's not so much that they're more secure because, I don't know, the smart contract itself is written better or written in a certain language. It's definitely got to do with the fact that they're easier to reason about, which means they're simpler. Like a roll-up bridge, so to speak, a roll-up bridge contract can definitely be implemented in a much simpler way than a cross-chain bridge. And as I said, there are many different cross-chain bridges. One of the most popular ones is actually just the multi-sig, right? But other ones that use some of these other existing bridge infrastructure, they have economic concerns, they have collusion concerns, they have validator concerns, all those sorts of stuff, right? Whereas a rollup bridge does not have that. It's on Ethereum layer 1, it is secured by the Ethereum layer 1 validators, and then the major concern that you have is that there's a smart contract bug, right? Just like any smart contract, essentially. Which is totally, I guess, expected at this point in time. Every smart contract that you interact with has a chance of bugs, but if the simpler it is, the less moving parts to the contract, the less chance of a bug there. So unfortunate to see that this has happened to Binance bridge here into their BNB chain, but again, not surprised. They actually ended up pausing the chain as well, which again, I'm not surprised about either since it's completely centralized, which is just kind of funny when I look at this. It's like, okay, well, there was this massive alt L1 thesis, and there's also people continuing going on about all this cross-chain stuff that's going to happen. A lot of people seem to be doubling down on the Cosmos ecosystem lately, which is fine. Like I don't consider the Cosmos ecosystem to be a bad ecosystem or anything like that, but they've got all these like theories and theses around certain things, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, guys, like, cross-chain stuff is really hard to get right, and it's really hard to do it securely. Vitalik has written about this before. So instead of doubling down on the thesis of like a cross-chain world, how about actually, making sure that you can actually do that? You can actually do it securely rather than doubling down on it. I think when it comes to something like rollups, we can have relative certainty that they're going to be secure, and they are secure because of that linkage to Ethereum. But when you start doing cross-chain stuff, when you start thinking about tokens securing chain. So for example, the app chain thesis, right? Where everyone's like, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are like, oh, we can have app chains as their own sovereign L1s. I'm like, oh, okay, that's all well and good, but that means you're securing yourself, you're securing that app chain with its native token. And then to talk to other chains, there has to be bridges everywhere, right? So from that perspective, you're adding so much risk in, and for what? Some sovereignty? I mean, Like, how much do you actually need that sovereignty? Like, there's very few things out there that actually need full sovereignty over the chain, and they can just become app rollups. And I've talked about this before. So there are a lot of considerations here. Obviously, I'm on the side of a rollup centric future where it's multi-chain, meaning Ethereum and rollups, rather than cross-chain, meaning Ethereum and all these other L1s just talking to each other, or just L1s in general talking to each other. I think it'll happen regardless, but I don't think that's the long-term secure solution for this ecosystem. At least that's my view on things. I mean, some people will call me an ETH maxi for that, but that's just my honest thoughts on that. Anyway, I'll link Samsung's thread in the YouTube description below, and you can go check this out. All right, some news today out of the, I guess, like Celsius drama that just keeps getting worse and worse. So Fubar here on Twitter put out a tweet that said, Celsius published a 14,000-page document detailing every user's full name, link to timestamp, and amount of each deposit, withdrawal, liquidation. This horrific breach of privacy will lead to many robbed and killed. Anything not provably cryptographically private will become public. So essentially what happened was that in this document, you can correlate people's balances on Celsius with their addresses on Ethereum, for example, which means that someone can, if they know who you are in Celsius, they can dox your entire address history, basically, if it's all connected, right? Which is a huge breach of privacy there. But this to me is just another nail in the coffin for KYC. You guys know my opinion on KYC. I really do think that it does more harm than good. I think that if you want to do KYC and companies are still forced to do it, then the best way to do it is to have the user own their own data, maybe through some kind of ZK technology. I've talked about this before, like a ZK ID or something on their phone, and then use that to prove to these services that you are who you say you are, and there's cryptographic proof there. As Fubar says here, that means that, and by doing that, it means that the data doesn't actually need to be stored at all by these centralized services, and they can essentially assign you a unique ID on their backend. They don't have to assign you anything else. They can just assign you a unique ID that basically says, this is this account, this is who this person is, based on your, ZK ID, as I was calling it just then. I think that's the better long-term solution. Obviously, I'm against KYC generally, but I mean, if we're being realistic, centralized services are probably never going to be able to not have to use KYC and AML, all that sorts of stuff. But it doesn't mean they have to use the implementation of collecting all the user data, storing it, and just having this massive treasure trove of data that hackers can steal or insiders can steal, and it can be leaked and all these sorts of stuff, which obviously leads to a lot of bad outcomes, especially when linking it to Ethereum addresses and other blockchain addresses, which most aren't actually private. So that's a huge issue, definitely a huge issue. But I'm optimistic about ZK ID technology or zero knowledge technology being used to do better implementations of KYC and AML for those centralized services. But when it comes to DeFi, we can work around that. Like truly decentralized products, and I'm not talking about the front ends. I'm talking about the actual smart contracts on Ethereum. Those things, shouldn't have KYC on them at all. And if they do, then you could just fork it or create a competitor and do a non-KYC competitor. Now, there's been a bit of concern I've been reading lately about people saying, well, the choke points, such as centralized exchanges, are just going to keep getting more and more regulated, more and more locked down, that eventually you're not even going to be able to withdraw to your own Ethereum address. So it doesn't matter that the Ethereum DeFi contracts don't have KYC on them. You can't even access them anyway. That is always a risk, guys. Like, that has always been a risk. Anytime you use a centralized service, they can at any time freeze your account. And there's been many people who have had bad experiences with this, where their account just gets frozen for months. They go through shitty customer support that just doesn't get back to them. It's really, really bad. And that's why I'm a big proponent of not your keys, not your coins, right? That was it's been around for a long time, but it's very serious. I mean, I know self-custody comes with its own risks and things like that. Like, you obviously probably don't trust yourself enough to self-custody large amounts, and maybe you trust a centralized exchange more. That's up to you. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the amount is. For me personally, I would never trust it with a centralized exchange. I've seen too many horror stories over the years, too many exchanges go bust, too many things happening. Even if you're doing everything right and you're not doing anything wrong, your account can get arbitrarily locked, and then if they don't prioritize it, if they don't want to help you with it, you can be locked out for quite a while, and that's your money sitting there, and you really don't have much recourse, especially for these overseas or foreign exchanges. So, for example, Binance, I mean, you really don't have much recourse there, right? Maybe in the US, obviously, if you're using Coinbase or Kraken, you have more recourse, but if you're using Binance, even FTX, because they're not, I mean, there's FTX US, but I mean, they're based in like the Seychelles or I think the Bahamas or one of those offshore entities there. It's hard to get recourse on that part anyway. But anyway, I've gone off track a little bit here. Just sad to see another one of these, I guess, things happen within the crypto ecosystem. For me personally, I'll be avoiding decentralized services as much as possible going forward. I mean, I have been traditionally. I've never used Celsius. I've never used BlockFi. I refuse to use any of them. And this is one reason why. There's a bunch of other reasons, but this is definitely one of the major ones, that's for sure. All right, so Julio from the Erigon team has a nice update here out today about Erigon. So he posted a screenshot to Twitter saying, look at Erigon just syncing without a consensus layer, with its own integrated consensus network layer. If you need to use the node for anything that is not super critical and you are too lazy to set up a consensus layer client, now with -- experimental.light client, which is the flag you can use within Erigon, you can do that. So Julio says this is without validation for now, so do not use it for anything like bridging or any critical infrastructure. Use it only for light personal use, channel analysis, or testing. It is now merged in Erigon D level, so go check it out. This is really cool because obviously post-merge Ethereum, to become an Ethereum full node, you need to run a consensus layer client and also an execution layer client, which if you're thinking from scratch, it can take a little while to do that. So if you want to just quickly spin up some personal infrastructure, well, you can just use Erigon and just sync Erigon. You don't have to worry about syncing a consensus layer client with this new experimental light client flag, which is very, very cool. And this is exactly what we're trying to do with light clients, or at least along the same lines of what we're trying to do with light clients here, where essentially we're trying to make it so that people don't have to download and sync all this sorts of stuff from the chain to use it as their own personal RPC or something like that. But you can basically get the same guarantees with a light client that what you're talking to or what you're seeing is the actual chain, is the actual canonical chain. So very, very cool to see this. I love all the experimentation Erigon is doing. I know that Erigon has gotten some flack here and there from people, especially around pre and post merge, how their client was a bit unstable with the merge itself and kind of posting invalid blocks and stuff like that. But the thing is, the reason why it's like that, I think, is because they have so many cool features that they're implementing into Erigon. It's like I think they want it to be, I mean, they've got like Erigon 2 and 3 coming out. They want it to be a more stable, reliable client like Geth, but they also want to push the boundaries here with more experimental stuff and stuff that people, end users can actually get usage out of and get value out of, which I think there needs to be a delicate balance there. At the end of the day, I spoke about this last week. Everyone's going to use Geth if Geth remains the most stable, secure, and reliable client. And there are other execution layer clients as well. There's not just Erigon. Obviously, there's Besu and Nethermind and Akula as well. I think there's some others out there too. But essentially, Geth is so popular because of that stability. Now, I think Erigon will probably get to a nice point where they've got these experimental features, but they've also got like a nice, stable client that works, that syncs, that is all well and good, and people love using. And that will obviously do wonders for client diversity, which is still on the execution layer side of things. Leaves much to be desired there, but I think it's just cool that Erigon is attempting to strike this balance between experimental features, but also becoming a reliable execution layer client. All right, some EIP 4844 news today, which is proto-dank sharding. So Coinbase actually shared a blog post here saying, excited to share Coinbase's public support and contributions to EIP 4844, an upcoming improvement to the Ethereum protocol that will scale layer 2 rollups by increasing transaction throughput and decreasing fees 10 to 100x. Now, I spoke about this the other day when I talked about the latest EIP 4844 community call and how there were two engineers from Coinbase on there. And Coinbase has been very, very involved with EIP 4844, which has been amazing to see. I mean, as I've said before, this is one of the major EIPs coming up. This will add heaps of scalability for rollups, and it's great to see that a institution like Coinbase that has resources is putting those resources behind this upgrade here. And obviously, they're not the only ones working on it. I discussed the other day, there's people from the Ethereum Foundation and Optimism and a few I guess independent people there as well working on this, and it's such a major thing that I'm just glad that Coinbase is involved. And there was also a comment from Jesse Polak here, who works in the protocols team at Coinbase, kind of saying, he's excited to share how Coinbase is helping scale Ethereum. And then Latte Tot, I think is how you say the name here, asked, why doesn't Coinbase allow deposits and withdrawals from layer 2 rollups yet? And Jesse said, we're working on this as well. More news soon. They've been working on it for quite a while. I believe probably a year at this point, or probably longer than that. And they added support for the Polygon POS chain, but I'm super excited for them to add support for things like Optimism and Arbitrum, obviously the rollups on Ethereum and other networks as time goes on there. But great to see them contributing all that they can to 4844 here. As I said, major upgrade for Ethereum, something that I'm going to be talking about more and more as the next few months go on, and you should definitely learn about it. I know it can become a bit technical. I mean, the merge itself was pretty technical, but you could have a kind of like high-level narrative for the merge. You can have one for 4844. You can say, okay, well, roll-up fees are going to go down by 10 to 100x. Well, then people will ask, well, why is that the case? Well, it's because we're introducing this new transaction type called blobs that is cheaper than storing call data, and then you can store these things and they expire after a month, and now I've already lost like 99% of people, right? Just by saying that, which is totally fine. But if you're really interested in learning about it, I've shouted out this website before. You can go to EIP4844.com. Yeah, EIP4844.com has all the resources you need on there to learn about exactly what this is and why it's going to be so important for Ethereum scalability going forward. All right, so I spoke about MEV-Boost, I believe yesterday or the day before, and Flashbots and how the delineation exists there, how like Flashbots is the company, MEV-Boost is the software. Well, Flashbots is actually looking to spin out MEV-Boost, the software, as its own self-sustained open source software project with a diverse group of stewards. So if you're interested in designing the future of MEV-Boost, you can take a look at this forum post here. This is very timely given all the recent, I guess, like OFAC sanction, Tornado Cash stuff, the relay censoring, all that sorts of stuff. And this is really, really cool because by making MEV-Boost a software and by disconnecting it from Flashbots themselves, it becomes more and more of a public good. It becomes something that the entire Ethereum ecosystem I guess support revolves around, works on, rather than just like one centralized company being Flashbots, the creators of it being the major contributor here. So very, very cool to see that this is being done here. It's not just an idea; it's actually going forward. Now, some people have asked, that this means there's going to be a Flashbots token, or sorry, an MEV-Boost token. I don't think so. I mean, I don't know for sure, obviously, and I don't know where it would fit in here. Obviously, when people say, we're going to spin it out as its own project and it's going to be self-sustained and fun and become part of the Ethereum ecosystem, 9 times out of 10 it results in a token, but not everything has to have a token. There can be things like MEV-Boost that just exist as pure public goods and get funding from various different things within the ecosystem. And to be honest, the goal is that for MEV-Boost, the software, to actually not be a long-term needed. With PBS, we actually just enshrine the MEV-Boost, I guess, features in the protocol itself, so you don't actually need this software anymore. But until we get to that, until we actually get to in-protocol PBS, which is a long way away, actually, it's not going to come anytime soon, we do need MEV-Boost, and it does need to be worked on, and all the learnings that we get from that can actually be implemented with in-protocol PBS as well. So the investment is worth it. But if there's a token, well, it doesn't really make much sense because long-term, logically, that token would actually be worthless because the MEV-Boost software or ecosystem gets folded into in-protocol PBS, and then in-protocol PBS means that it's actually in the Ethereum protocol itself, and it's not actually secured or incentivized by a different token. It's obviously part of the ETH ecosystem then. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be a token or not. But that's just one thing that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to clarify there. But you should definitely give this forum post a read. I mean, Vitalik chimed in here and said, MEV-Boost is interesting because it doesn't quite fit into any of the buckets that we're used to thinking about within Ethereum. It's not part of the Ethereum protocol, so it doesn't fit well under the all core devs umbrella. It is a protocol, but not a centralized application, right? It's not a regular ERC because it's not finished, and it's already systematically important and greatly affects people's economic interests. Obviously, it is because MEV is a very big thing. So, and then Vitalik continues by saying, another thing to keep in mind is that in the medium term, realistically 2 to 8 years, really wide timeline here. But he said he's not sure. MEV-Boost will be replaced by in-protocol PBS, as I was explaining. So the structure does not need to last forever, but we can't assume PBS will come quickly. What does this all imply? Some kind of parallel version of all core devs? Question mark. Definitely not a simple question. And then there's some more discussions around here, some from people in the ecosystem like Patrick McCory here, Hudson Jameson, Yaz as well, who's been pretty involved with the Ethereum ecosystem and the Ethereum Classic ecosystem as well for a very long time. But yeah, essentially, yeah, I mean, I think this is quite important when you kind of look at this and see that MEV-Boost as a piece of software definitely needs to be a public good. It can't just be centralized around one company, especially not a company that is US-based and is required to adhere to OFAC sanctions and all that sorts of stuff. So I thought this was interesting. But I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to check out yourself. But this is a perfect segue into something else got to do with the recent OFAC sanctions. So Liam here has tweeted, "Has OFAC violated your rights? You may be entitled to decentralization." And he's introduced something called Dappnet. So what is Dappnet? Dappnet is something that is being made to resist capture. It is a permissionless application network built on IPFS and ENS. So the problem right now is that we can access dApps through DNS and servers, so through the normal web, but they can be taken down, censored, captured, and seized from us at any time. The solution to this so far has been using the ENS decentralized name system and hosting the content of dApps on IPFS, which is a BitTorrent-like peer-to-peer network. ENS names can't be seized, and IPFS cannot be censored. So currently, the best way to use dApps deployed on here is to use gateway like eth.limo, and gateways make the UX simple for users by simply visiting tornadocash.eth.limo, and the gateway will handle resolving the ENS domain to its content on IPFS. However, these gateways always fail because they are all centralized. Go on, click it. So click tornadocash.eth.limo. You can't access Tornado because eth.limo is US-based and they had to censor it. So another big gateway like eth.link went down because of the Virgil Griffith drama there. And this will obviously happen time and time again because these are centralized gateways. So the only solution here is true decentralization, putting IPFS/ENS tech into the browser, and you know the big brain Illuminati is thinking about this too. So this is what Liam has worked on. Basically, he was started working on this, figuring out a go-to-market for his decentralized database network called Goliath, and he got thinking, this wouldn't be too hard to build. I know exactly what it should look like. So he focused on building it, and there's a video here of that happening. So in the background, everything is downloaded peer-to-peer via the capture-resistant IPFS network. The Dappnet client runs a local IPFS node in the background. The node is pre-configured to be fast. It automatically peers with big IPFS providers like Cloudflare and Fleek. The client runs a local ENS gateway equivalent to eth.limo or eth.link, but rewritten to run completely locally on the user's machine. And there are lots of other details that make this experience beautiful. HTTPS everywhere for .eth, useful for error pages, etc., etc. And all this puts together means that for the first time ever, we can own a place on the internet that can't be taken away from us and doesn't rely on a single host who dictates what is allowed. I think that will have a profound effect for the web, as Liam says here. And the thread continues. You can give it a read. I did kind of read a lot of that thread there, but I think it's important context. So the TLDR is that this is a client that runs locally on your own computer and that does everything nice and easily in the background for you to be able to access these apps on IPFS in a censorship-resistant way. So you run your own local ENS resolver, you run your own client to talk to IPFS, so that you can access this content. And in the screenshot here, you can see just a very basic example of what this looks like. It's a client that has the apps here. You would double click on this or something and it would load up the app for you, and you'd be accessing it on IPFS rather than a centralized server, resolving using a decentralized ENS resolver as well there, or using your own resolver, I should say. This is a game changer, guys. Like, it's mind-boggling that we haven't had this up until now, but the fact that this exists now, the fact that it's going to keep getting worked on, Liam's probably going to be able to raise money for this, to be honest, because it's so important, is awesome. And this obviously is in response to the OFAC stuff. You know, the funny thing about the OFAC sanctions is that they've really kicked the ass of the Ethereum community to take censorship resistance seriously, because before it was an afterthought. It was more of a, okay, we know there's a possibility of censorship and we know that it's a risk, but it hasn't happened yet in any real way, so we're going to just leave it for now. And then all of a sudden, in August 8th, I believe, OFAC came out and said, we're going to sanction Tornado Cash. And then, oh shit, everything went haywire, right? Like, censorship happened here, it happened here. The block producers started censoring because of things like MEV-Boost relays, the front ends did it, and then everyone was like, oh shit, we need to actually get serious about censorship resistance now, and not just at the layer 1, but across the entire stack, the ENS resolver, the front ends, right? Everything, and all needs to be decentralized. So this Dappnet, the thing here is one step towards that. It's obviously not the quote-unquote solution, but the thing is that as long as this is open source, which it isn't right now, but Liam says it will be open source in the future, as long as this is open source and works as advertised, then this is all you really need at the end of the day, because you're talking to the contracts on Ethereum, and as long as the contracts themselves aren't censoring you, then you're good. Now, obviously, this doesn't address block, I guess, like layer 1 block producer censorship concerns, right? It doesn't really address that at all. But the thing is that that's also being worked on with other solutions, but this is at the highest level of layers of the stack, which I think is absolutely awesome. So go check this thread out, give it a read. I think, as I said, this is amazing, groundbreaking, love it. I don't know what else I can say about it at this stage. I think that you're just going to have to read the thread, form your own opinion on this, but I'm definitely going to be using this, as time goes on. I think that this is just a demo right now. I don't know if there's actually any way to kind of use it right now. I think, I'm not totally sure if there's a way to use it right now. Yeah, I guess not just yet. And as I said, it's not open source, but once it does come out, I'll definitely be a user of this. That's for sure. All right, so we've all heard talk recently about how post-merge, it may look like that ETH became a security, right? Which is nonsense. We all know it's nonsense, but the folks over at Paradigm have put together this blog post, or at least them and Jake Chavinsky, who's not at Paradigm, has put together this blog post titled "Ethereum's New Staking Model Does Not Make ETH a Security." So this was published by Rodrigo, Sierra, Amy, Aixi Zhang, and Jake Chavinsky. I've probably butchered the pronunciation of their names, but that's fine. And it's quite lengthy. I suggest giving it a read, but this is great. This is what we need. We need people who know what they're talking about, writing about these sorts of things and writing about it as part of a publication, as part of a reputable firm such as Paradigm. If I had to pick one VC in this ecosystem that has the best reputation, it would be Paradigm. Like at the top of every list you could find about VCs in crypto, Paradigm should be at the top every single time. So it just sends a very strong signal here. And this blog post, I haven't read the whole thing yet. I skimmed through it a bit. Was really good. It actually explained things in terms that I could understand, and it's got a bunch of references here as well within the footnotes section. It's not too long, so definitely recommend giving it a read, but I think this is good signal. And I think it's good that they've come to the conclusion that it obviously does not make ETH a security. I mean, we all knew it didn't, but there's been people pushing that for a little while now, which is kind of annoying and disappointing and everything, but that's just what's been happening, right? So yeah, anyway, I go give this a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so I spoke about ETH restaking the other day in the context of EigenLayer. And Vance Spencer put out a tweet here today saying he's excited for ETH restaking. So for example, stake ETH, get an LSD such as STETH, stake STETH to secure new blockchains such as compute, storage, data availability, and this is similar to how DeFi yield farms grew stablecoins dramatically during DeFi summer. Restaking is a catalyst for LSDs being truly used, expands the total addressable market of ETH, which it does. It's really cool when you think about it like this. And for those of you who are around in DeFi summer, you'll recognize this interface. This was forked endlessly, this front end, and everyone was using it. You would deposit your So in these farms, you would kind of like deposit a token, and then you would earn, another token, and then you could get that token and deposit that into another farm. There was just all this restaking going on, and it was extremely popular. And it's actually what made DeFi what it is today. Really, it's what grew DeFi and stablecoins so dramatically, as Vance said here. So could we see a similar thing with restaking ETH? Because if you're already staking your ETH, and you have STETH, you have RETH, you have some other liquid staking token, and you're just sitting in your wallet, well, you want to do something with that. So if someone says to you, hey, you can restake this with us and we'll pay you some of our token, or you can restake this with us and you'll secure a new blockchain and you'll get paid in fees or whatever, people are going to do that. And I think that's a really cool way to do it. So I'm going to be paying attention to restaking more and more as time goes on. But you can definitely check out this tweet. I mean, there's a little tweet thread here. It's not really that long, but I just thought it was a cool thing that Vance tweeted about today. All right, so Aztec is out with a major announcement today. So they've said, you've heard of zero-knowledge proofs, you've heard of snarks and plonk and ZK rollups, but you haven't gotten started because you don't have a spare brain dedicated to learning cryptography. That all changes today with Noir. So Noir is a universal language of zero knowledge. So basically, it is a domain-specific language for creating and verifying zero-knowledge proofs based on Rust. This is obviously for the developers out there, but this is cool because I think one of the main blockers for developers has been the fact that zero knowledge stuff just generally is quite daunting when you look at it and when you start to learn about it, especially on the development side of things. And as Aztec said here, the need is that the current ZK stack is cumbersome and hard to understand. Circuit building languages require knowledge of cryptographic concepts, creating a barrier to widespread developer option. To build in ZK right now, you basically need 2 brains, and the simplicity of Noir means that having 1 brain is enough. By abstracting away all the cryptographic complexity while retaining the power and flexibility of other circuit building languages, Noir allows any developer, not just those with cryptography knowledge, to build ZK apps. I mean, anything that simplifies the developer experience here for ZK stuff is welcome in my eyes. And I think that Aztec providing this for the community is awesome because it's not just going to apply to the Aztec protocol itself. Other ZKs can use this too. Like, obviously, Aztec is doing a lot of great stuff on the privacy side of things, but there's plenty of these ZK EVMs coming out. There's plenty of these other ZK constructions coming out that could take advantage of something like Noir. So very cool announcement here from Aztec. You can read their full announcement thread in the YouTube description below. Right, another big announcement here today came out of MakerDAO. So MakerDAO has initiated a $500 million investment in US treasuries and corporate bonds. Now, this is huge. $500 million, that's $500 million, guys. That's not no small amount here. So what this is doing is, for this allocation, the DAO has partnered with a DeFi asset advisor called Monetellus or Monetellus. I think it's Monetellus. So to buy these bonds and to buy the US treasury bonds and investment grade corporate bonds. Now, there's been a bit of discussion about this, especially in the Daily Gwei Discord channel, about how this may just centralize DAI even further, but I don't think that's the case. Like, I think people don't understand that what USDC is backed by. So USDC is obviously a large part of the Maker protocol. It's a large part of the collateral in there. But USDC itself is not just backed by US dollars in a bank account. It is backed by US government short-term bonds, I believe, USD, like some level of USD, and then cash equivalents, and then probably some other stuff in smaller quantities as time goes on. So and I've always found this bizarre because what do people think, or how do people think these stablecoin issuers are actually earning money on issuing this stablecoin? They're not just going to keep it in USD and keep it in a savings account where they earn some interest on. I mean, obviously it's higher these days, but for the longest time, the interest on your USD in a bank account was incredibly low. So it wasn't worth them from a business perspective to do that. So they buy other things that give them a better yield. Obviously, they're trying to buy things that are as low risk as possible, because if they don't, then obviously it expands the risk to all the USDC holders. But don't be under the illusion that USDC is 100% backed by actual USD in a bank account. That's not the case at all. It is backed by, as I said, cash equivalents, some USD and short-term US government bonds, which, I mean, short-term US government bonds is probably just as safe as cash when you really think about it at the end of the day. Really just as safe as USD, I should say. But yeah, I wanted to clarify that for people. So does this purchase centralized DAI even further? I don't think so. I think it actually probably does the opposite, because you actually... So there's 2 ways you, I guess, like, decentralize the collateral. Like, you decentralize it by using decentralized collateral, such as ETH, and then you do it also by, I guess... There's a blurred line here between decentralize and distribute the collateral, so that you have not just concentration on one centralized collateral, but you have a bunch of different centralized collaterals that are all working together to act as, obviously, the full collateral for the system. And through that distribution, you get some level of decentralization. So I think that's worthwhile doing. And I also think that, as I've explained before, MakerDAO's approach to things is definitely trying to break into TradFi. And I've talked about that on the refill before, and about how some people don't like that, other people do. I personally... look, I mean, I my opinion on this changes from time to time. I'm more neutral on this than most people are. And I've talked about how I don't actually believe that we could get a truly decentralized, scalable stablecoin. I just don't think that's ever going to exist. So what's the next best thing? Well, what Maker is building with DAI is probably the next best thing. Like, as much as there's centralization concerns, as much as it doesn't, it doesn't look like the DAI that we know and loved on the single collateral DAI, if DAI wants to actually scale, then I think this is what's needed here. So that's why I'm more neutral on this topic, but I'm always happy to hear rebuttals to that and different opinions on that. But that's my current stance on things. But you can read this full announcement. I'll put it in the YouTube description below. And wow, I've gone over time here. So last up here is an announcement from Gitcoin. So Gitcoin is evolving. Gitcoin grants will continue to be a public good on which the Web3 ecosystem can rely upon, but soon we'll also be launching a concurrent offering, the Grants Protocol. So what is the Grants Protocol? Well, it's a tool currently in closed beta that will allow any community to launch its own grants program that incorporates community decision making. This is really cool. It basically means you can create your own Gitcoin grants for your community. Whatever that is, you can create your own version of Gitcoin grants using Grants Protocol, which I think is amazing for a number of different reasons. Firstly, it means you don't have to rely on Gitcoin and Gitcoin's ecosystem to do your own grants protocol. Secondly, it means that any community in the world can tap into the awesomeness of Gitcoin grants structure generally, like the things like quadratic funding, right? And thirdly, it further decentralizes out the grants program. It's not just Gitcoin grants, it's now blah blah grants or such and such grants or yada yada grants, right? It's whatever you want it to be. And that can all be extended out globally to any community around the world to fund public goods for whatever they want to fund, right? Which I think is very, very cool. But you can read the full announcement of this in the YouTube description below, and that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all next week. Thanks everyone.